We start by logging in with the default username and password. In this case, it's admin. It is possible for the factory reset password to be on the bottom of your system. Right off the bat, normally the setup wizard comes up, and I quit that last time to go in and set my static IP address. If you ever want to return to that wizard, you simply click Setup Wizard up here, and it will walk you through that setup wizard all over again. So if you like the setup wizard, go ahead and use it. There's no harm in it. It helps you reset the password, set your network settings, time zone, extensions, some trunks, that sort of thing. We are not going to use the setup wizard. We are going to go through it on our own. But for now, we're going to go through an overview of the whole system. What is it we're looking at? Why are all of these tabs here? How are they relevant to me? And why do I need them? We're not going to touch on every single thing in detail, but we're going to give you a general idea. So to start, if I hit the up arrow here, that section goes away. Each one of these sections is a category that has items underneath it that we're going to look at. If you like your screen bigger, you can even hit this top button and shrink it down even smaller. But all those things are still there, and you can quickly access them in any way you want. On this screen, you have your general dashboard. It's under System Status, and it will show you details about your system. The system has hard drive space, which is what this talks about here. How much space is being used, the data partition and the configuration partition. They separate these two out so that your data can be viewed separately from your configuration. From there, it goes over here and shows how busy your memory is on the UCM and how fast and hard your CPU is working. If either of these hit 100%, things aren't going to work right. You're going to have a problem. So if you hit your dashboard and the first thing you see is that one of these is sitting at 100% and not dropping down, that's a problem. Right out of the box, nothing configured, 11% memory usage, 1% CPU usage. Over here you have the external ports. I showed you that USB drive and the SD spot, and this will show you if something's connected. Right now there's nothing in the USB, and I do have an SD card. It's about an 8 gig card, and about a gig of it is used up. So a quick overview of that. If you create trunks, analog trunks, VoIP trunks, any kind of trunk, it will be listed here and tell you its status. Blue being available, so it's working. Yellow means it's in use. The red is something's wrong, something's not right. And gray doesn't necessarily mean anything other than we're not keeping an eye on it for you. It could be working, might not be working. We don't really care. It's just not being monitored. So not good, not bad, but does show you that the trunk is there. The interface status, it tells you which things are plugged in. Right now our USB is not plugged in. Our SD card is plugged in. We have two ports. We have the LAN port, and that LAN port can be using PoE. Right now the LAN port is connected and PoE is in use. So it tells us a lot of stuff there. FXS, S is your stations. It is the analog phones and faxes. Nothing's plugged into it. FXO, that's your outside lines that you get from the telephone company, and nothing's plugged into those right now either. All the way on the left here, we have our PBX status. This shows you your time, your active calls, extensions, conference rooms, call queues, parking lots. It tells you if dynamic defense is on, failed to ban, if you have scheduled backups turned on or not, if you have any automatic synchronizations turned on, if you have the automatic cleaner turned on. So it's a quick overview of the basics of the phone system that many people want to know about. So up here, to go over these four, if you have an active call currently going, this should have a 1 on. If that active call is in a parking slot, you might lose this and go down to 0, but this will turn to a 1. It tells you how many extensions you have on the system and how many are currently registered. It tells you how many conference rooms you have and how many are currently in use. Same with queues. So it gives you a lot of information as we go, and you can use this page to quickly determine if things are working the way that they should be. Next one down, system information. Gives you a quick overview of what firmware version you're using. In this case, it is the program version that we're looking at, 1.0.18.9. That's what we just updated to and installed. The top part tells you the type of system you have, 6202, and which version of hardware you have, which could be relevant if Grandstream asks you for that information. Something goes wrong, okay, what system do you have, what version is it? It has a part number, it tells you the current system time. If your system time isn't right, it can mess up other things. So always make sure your system time is up to date and working. Uptime, this is a neat one. This tells you how long the system has been running since its last restart. This can get into many, many, many days. I try to make sure I restart them at least once a year. I've had systems run flawlessly for well over a year without any problems. It just keeps going and going and going. I've had other systems I've had to reboot them every couple of weeks. A lot of times it has to do with the SIP trunks and the network traffic and the internet provider and things that we can't always control. And so a reboot just helps everything correct itself. And this tells you how long it's been since your last one. Active calls, anytime there's a call coming in that is actively going, it's going to list here. You'll see it ringing all the phones, you'll see where it's going, who's talking on it. If you have a call coming in and then going out to a cell phone, it will show both of those. If you have a call in park, it will not show it here. So that's where having your dashboard up and going, okay, I have 3 active calls and 2 people in park. You can then flip to active calls, see your 3 active calls, but you won't see the 2 park slots. So make sure you're always watching that dashboard if you're checking for active calls. Because if somebody's in park and you want to reboot the system, the dashboard will give you better information. The network status, I've never really used this page, but it tells what things are connected on which ports, what they're doing. If that's relevant to you, this is where you find that information. So there's lots of stuff. The next category is extensions and trunks. This is where you make the majority of the items that allow your system to function. Let's go through it. Extensions. Just like you'd expect, these are the extensions that get tied to a physical phone. They can be used for just forwarding to cell phones, stuff like that. This is where you set up follow me settings, all of that kind of stuff. To do it, you hit the plus sign and just follow the data. You can make a single extension or a batch of extensions, which we will do later. Extension groups. This is where after you've made extensions, you can create a group and call it like sales. And then if you make a group, then when you're making a ring group or a call queue or something like that, you can use the group as your addition rather than figuring out exactly what extension you need to use. So that can come in handy later. Analog trunks. So this is where you create the pathing that allows an analog trunk to make it into your phone system and be answered by an IVR and stuff like that. But you start here. You would add a trunk, you tell it which ports you want to use. Both of them can be used. You give it a name. If the trunk has caller ID or not. And that's actually an important one. A lot of people don't think anything of it, but if your analog trunk does not provide caller ID and you have this box checked, your line won't work. And if your trunk has caller ID and you have this box unchecked, your trunk won't work. So caller ID and analog lines are important. Make sure you have that setting correct. It is the most common setting that I help people with. They say my analog trunk won't work. I say, is your caller ID setting right? Oh, that was it. So if you are outside of the US, make sure you have the correct caller ID scheme as well. Those are the two most common things that I hear people changing. You can change your outline selection to be ascending or descending, or even a pole. So ascending means it would use 1 first and then 2. If you're descending, you'll use 2 first and then 1. So if you have calls coming in using port 1 first and you want to leave that open, you can do that. Or if you have a certain trunk you want to use, or a certain line you want to use first, you can make it descending and put that first line in the last port. If you have like a 6208, you'll have 8 lines that you can do this with. So ascending, descending, stuff like that. The VoIP trunks, just like the analog trunks, can be made one at a time. The new firmware has the trunk group you can make, which allows you to create multiple usernames and passwords for a single provider. So some SIP providers allow you to have unlimited concurrent calls. Others make you have a trunk created with a username and password for each concurrent call that you want. If you have a provider like that, you can type that provider in here, and then it automatically pops in the name of the place you're using. If you don't have one, you have to type it in manually. But whichever one you choose, it gives you the host name. But then you might end up with usernames and passwords and auth IDs for 5 different trunks. And it will use these in order, so you don't have to create 5 different setups for each trunk that you want to make. You just enter all 5 passwords, that's your 5 concurrent calls, and you can work off that. If you have a provider that uses unlimited concurrent calls, then you just add a regular SIP trunk. And we'll go over that later. SLA stands for Shared Line Appearance, and this is not something I'm going to go over with you. Shared line appearance allows for a group of phones to, how do you say it, have a more traditional look to your phone system. With analog lines in the past, every single line that came in would show up on all of the phones. And now with SIP trunking and with the IP phones, we use something called call park to replicate that. But it is still possible to use shared line appearance. You lose a ton of features on the system when you start using shared line appearance. So I'm not going to go over this. It is possible, and we can set it up. If you need help with it, you can give us a call. We're happy to assist people with that, but we don't recommend it. So outbound routes. Once you've created your trunks, you come in here and add an outbound route, and you can see there's no trunk, so it won't even let me make one. And essentially you make a rule that says which trunk to use for each type of dial that you make, a 3-digit dial, 7-digit, 10-digit, 11-digit, 800 numbers, international numbers. And we'll go through all of that later. But you have to have the trunks made, or you have to have the VoIP trunk or analog trunk made in order to have a route available for it. Inbound routes, same thing. I can't make any inbound routes because I don't know where the calls are coming from yet. I got to have a trunk that's going to receive the call in order to route that call to where it needs to go. So we'll go through those later. Call features. So this is where both the extensions and trunks and the call features are all part of creating that flow of information in and out to get calls where they need to go. The extensions and trunks are the roadways, so to speak, and the call features are the extras, the fine-tuning, the stuff that makes your system happier, makes you happier. It does the unique features. So let's go through those. Conference. You can create a conference room. You can create many conference rooms on this system, and they can handle as many as you have concurrent calls available. So if you're using analog lines, the only limit is the amount of analog lines that can call in from the outside. Internally, you could have your entire staff in a conference room with 3 people calling in from the outside and have a group conversation of 20 people. It'd be just fine. So we'll go through how to look at that later, how to go through that. conference settings, different thresholds. All of that we will go through at another time, but conference rooms are built right into the system. There's a Google service that can be linked to that lets you schedule conferences and send them all out to all of your employees via Google, but we're not going to go through that either. Conference calls can be recorded, and they are listed in the last tab here under recordings. Video conference. This is a new feature. It's brand new with this beta firmware, and I have not gone through it yet, but I imagine it allows for the same type of setup as the conference room. Looks like you can schedule stuff too. Yeah. So I won't go through that right now. Know that it exists, video conferencing, and it can be hosted by your UCM. IVRs, interactive voice response. So another term for this, another word that people use is auto attendant. This is the automated system that answers your calls and says, your call is important to us. If you know your party's extension, dial it at any time. Press 1 for sales, 2 for tech support, 3 if you want to talk to our president. He's on his cell phone, so we'll forward you right there. You obviously wouldn't say that, but all those things are possible. You can create an IVR, you can give it any number you want, name it, what it can do. Can it call out to other extensions? Like can it call out to my boss and reach his cell phone? Can they dial other extensions? Can they get to other IVRs and extensions if they just know the number? And I can allow that or not allow that. It's up to me. All those settings are in here. The key pressing events, where they go, how they're routed, are on the second tab here, and we'll go through all of that later, but the IVRs are right here. Voicemail. This is just the voicemail settings. So all voicemails will get sent to the email that's listed in the person's extensions. The setting for that, send voicemail to email, is a global setting here. This is for everybody on the whole system. Can it do it or can it not do it? And then keep the voicemail after emailing it. After it emails it, should I delete the email or keep it? By default, every voicemail gets sent to the email on file for that extension, and every voicemail is still kept on the phone after that email was sent. You can view the email template, change it to be whatever you want. But the one thing I want to note is that if you leave a message less than 3 seconds long, it just deletes it. It weeds out the hang-ups and stuff like that. That setting can be changed. I think 3 seconds is nice. It really weeds out a lot of unnecessary voicemails. So all of these settings can be adjusted. Max message per folder, sometimes I bump that up to like 200 because you get some people that just never delete their voicemails, and it gives them a lot of time before you have to go in and do it manually. So ring groups, these are groups that, I can't do any ring groups without extensions, that allow you to ring a group of phones, and if another call comes in, the call will ring in the background. It won't just not ring that phone. It'll still ring in the background if you're on a call, and then go to a destination of your choosing. The paging and intercomming, these are for groups, which I can't make right now because I don't have extensions. And you can also view the settings here, what the alert info header is, and those kind of settings. I won't go through what that means, but phones have to be told they're allowed to be paged to or intercom to. They won't do it by default. So there's other settings to change in that regard. Call queues, much like a ring group, a call queue will ring a group of people, and the difference is that when you have a call queue and you're on a call, the call will not ring in the background for you. The inbound route leaves you alone and rings everybody else in the queue except for the people that are on the phone. And then after you hang up your call, if that call is still in the queue, then your phone will start ringing after a brief cooldown. And you can program what that cooldown is. Queues can circle forever and ever, or they can have an exit option to go to voicemail, or they can have an exit option after you've gone through the queue 3 times, dump to an IVR, stuff like that. So queues and ring groups work very similar to each other, but they're not the same. Pickup groups is a whole other thing. By default, if you have a BLF of another person in your office, you can grab their call that's coming in directly to their phone by hitting their BLF key. Pickup groups allow you to fine-tune that. I'm not going to go over it right now, but that's the gist of what that can do. Dial by name. This is your dial by name directory. If you want to create custom directories, so like I could create a sales directory, and then I put in just the extensions that I want in that directory into the members here. And I can either query them by last name and then first name, or first name and last name. I can use a menu or by order where it just lists them off. So you'll have to play with these options, but you can create as many directories you want. You can create one with everyone in it or just a few departments, and then use those options in IVRs. For our dial by name directory for sales, or for our sales directory, press 1, and then it goes to this dial by name directory that you just created. So you can really customize that now, which is nice. Speed dials, this is an interesting feature. You can create any speed dial extension that you want, and you can number it. I'll make this one 55, and 55 is going to go to whatever I want. I want it to dial an external number, and if I dial 55 on a phone, it's now going to dial this phone number for me, so I don't even have to think about what the number is. So if you want to create 100 different speed dials for everyone on the system, you can create a quick cheat sheet, so to speak, of quick dial extensions, and that's what speed dial does. DISA is, I can't remember the acronym right now, but it's designed to let someone from the outside of the office call into a phone number so that they can turn around and call out as the business. So if you have people with cell phones that don't want to give out their cell phone numbers, this is one way to do that. They call in, they type in their code, and then they dial a number, and they can call out with the caller ID of the phone system rather than their cell phone. Typically nowadays we use soft phones to do that, and that works with this system as well, so we don't see a lot of this used anymore. Callback. This is new. This is new to this system, but it's been around for a while. The callback will hang up on a caller and then call them back, directing them to the selected extension when it's their turn in the queue, so to speak. So this is that setting that says, if you'd like to have our guys call you back when your spot is up, then you don't have to sit there on hold. That's callback. So you can build that in. I actually have not used it yet, but I'd be interested to try it. So we'll see how that goes. Event list. I don't know what this setting does. That's a new one for me. I have not had to use the event list for anything in my phone system creation, so we'll have to review that another time. Feature codes. These are the codes that allow for keystroke dialing. So if you want to park a call, you can press #72 if I have it enabled, rather than pressing the button for call park or something like that. Blind transfers can be done with #1 if you turn it on. Attended transfers with *2. Stuff like that. You can auto mix record, so you can turn on recording with *3 if it's enabled. In this case, all these are not enabled by default, but can be. And that's what feature codes do. Call park used to be in here as well, but that got moved. Common feature codes are like paging. If you wanted to listen, whisper, or barge on a call, so you can use that would be for training purposes, stuff like that. You want to hear what your employees are talking about with the customer, and you don't want the customer to know that you're listening. That's listen. Whisper lets you talk to the person that you're training without the the customer hearing you, and barge allows you to completely take it over. By default, those three are off. You'd have to check this box to turn them on. But voicemail access is another feature code, *98 or *97 if you want to go directly into your own and bypass the password. And so that has to be enabled on the extensions as well, but that's a whole other thing. So lots of feature codes to deal with. Fax T38. So analog lines, T38 is the SIP high speed transfer. How do you say that? T38 is just the network way to do fax detection. You can create fax extensions. Essentially, it allows you to receive a fax and email it to the person listed here, whatever email address is listed. And that's all fax extensions do, is they allow you to point to an email address. If you have 6 fax extensions and each one's going to a different email address, every fax that comes in will be listed here. And will also get emailed to those fax extensions. In the fax settings, you can control the details of it. Faxing over internet usually works, but it is flaky. Faxing is an old technology that's been adapted to work with voice over IP and is not perfect. I have never seen a perfect faxing setup over internet, but some of them can get pretty close. The parking lot, that was in feature codes and got moved because now you can create multiple parking lots. It used to be just the one. You would transfer to 700 to get them into a parking slot, and it would go into the slots designated by that lot. Now you can add multiples. And then in here, I often will come in and use parking lots as extensions. If this is checked, it allows you to put a parking lot for 701, 702, 703, and so on and so forth as a BLF type of key. And if you want to park somebody, all you have to do is press the key rather than doing a transfer. And it allows it to throw it right into the slot. It works really slick. Emergency calls. When an emergency call is placed, it allows you to get a notification. So we'll call this one 911. And the emergency number is 911. We're going to call it significantly urgent. If this option is not enabled, then I'll remove it. So that allows this allows the call to seize a line and immediately make a call out. So if all the lines are busy, it hangs somebody up and gives this person the line. The custom prompt is what you as an individual get told and which trunk it should use, and then if your extension's in here, you move that to the right, and every time 911 is called, you will receive whatever this custom prompt message is on your phone while that phone is calling 911. So you get a notification saying, Billy Bob in extension 206 just called 911. And that's the emergency calls notification. That's what this does. SCA, that is another tab that I have never used, and I am not sure what that one means yet. So we will skip that one for now. On to the next section, PBX settings. So we've gotten through our first 2 main sections here, and that helps customize your system. The next 2 sections are technical sides of your system. This is the general stuff that tells your extensions what they're allowed to do, what your audio streams are allowed to do, what music you're using, where your recordings go, stuff like that. It's the background stuff that nobody really knows about. General settings. This is one of the reasons I actually did the upgrade to the beta software to show you this. Right now you have a global level caller ID number for all the outgoing calls. This is the caller ID that it would use if it had nothing else available. Typically these don't really do a lot anymore. They used to, but with the asterisk 13, it changed where it grabs caller ID from, and we'll go over that in another thing. It's in the DoD settings on the trunk, on the VoIP trunk. And so we'll go over that another time. The ring timeout. I usually change this. This I set to 20 to 30 seconds. So if you go 4 seconds per ring, 30 seconds is still like 7, 8 rings. It's a lot of rings. So sometimes I'll set that to 20. Usually I set it to 30. This is the ring timeout for any phone that's ringing that is not following another rule. So if you're going into a ring group, it'll follow the timer on the ring group. But if somebody just calls your extension, this is how long it's going to ring before it goes to voicemail. And 60 seconds is a long time. Now, in your extensions, you can change these on your own. You can set it for each extension individually, but it has to be less time than whatever your general setting is set to. So I usually set this to 30, and if I need it less, I set it individually on the extension. The part that is new is this right here, name of UCM. I can now name every one of my UCMs, and I go through a lot of them. And so knowing which one I'm working on helps, because I get on a screen like this and I look up here and I see, oh, I'm on a UCM 6202. I have 14 of those. Which one am I on? And then I have to try to connect my IP address with the correct unit to make sure I'm not making a change on the wrong system. So they added this, and I can call this Billy's Barbecue. So this particular unit will be used at Billy's Barbecue, and that'll help me understand that that's the system I'm on. If I save that and apply that change, this is the first setting I'm actually changing for you so you can see what it does. I'm going to watch right here. I'm going to refresh the screen. Once that's in place, my system is now labeled Billy's Barbecue. So I can always know exactly what system I'm on. Now we're in PBX settings, general settings, and I'm going to log out and we're going to pick back up here, but I wanted to show you this too. Even when I'm logged out and I'm at my admin screen, it tells me up here, I'm on Billy's Barbecue. So I know exactly what system I'm logging into, which helps me remember the password I need for that system and helps me make sure that I'm making the changes on the system that I want to be making changes on. So that's what that setting's for, and I really like it. The one thing I'm hoping they'll do is move that from here up to the tab on Chrome and Safari so that it's listed up here, and as I'm seeing 4 different tabs of systems, I can see Billy's Barbecue up here. I bet that'll be coming, but it's not here yet. So I'm going to get rid of Billy's Barbecue. And we'll keep going. Now, the last thing I changed on this page is the extension range. So right now, if you attempt to create an extension on the system, it is going to use these extension numbers for these particular groups. So ring groups will only be 6400 to 6499. Conference extensions will only be 6300 to 6399. So if you ever need to make an extension that isn't in this list, for example, if you wanted extension 500, you would have to check disable extension range, and that makes it so that you can pick any number you want for any of these. So if you're not familiar with the numbers that are used that are under 1,000, don't do this. But once you're familiar with all the different numbers the system uses, you can check this box and number anything any way you want. If you want to modify this range and still keep it restricted, you can leave this open but change these numbers here. But that just takes a little practice. So you got to understand what you're doing, what you want to have, what extension number before you start messing with this. In this case, I am going to disable the extension range because I like to create the numbers that I want. Every time you make a change and save, you can wait to apply changes, but that won't take effect until you finally hit apply changes. So you can stack multiple saves on top of each other and then apply them all at once at the end if you want. Continuing on, SIP settings. Most of these are pretty generic. You just leave them as default. If you want to change the port that your different things are connecting in on, the UDP port, for example, by default is 5060. That can be changed to 5070, 5080, anything you want. I don't ever use that one. Session timers are in here if you need to mess with those. TCP TLS, so this allows your extensions to connect on port 5060 still, but use a TCP packet rather than a UDP packet. For those of you that know what that is, this is where you turn that on. If you want to use encryption, so you can use TLS as well. You would check both of these. This requires a reboot if you apply that to your system. Does not stop the system from using UDP to register, but can be changed there. NAT. This is important. This is the one place you will need to change things if you want your SIP trunks to work right. When I'm going to use non-technical terms here. When the phone system talks to a SIP provider, the SIP provider is the person that gives you the internet-based phone system, the connection to the internet, to the phone world using the internet. So when the phone system talks to a SIP provider, the SIP provider needs to know, where do I respond to? Do I just, what's the IP address that you're coming from that I should always reply to? That's what this external host is. This can be a DNS address. It can be dynamic DNS. Most often it's the static IP address of your network, the WAN address. So the address that you get from your internet provider goes right here. And for me, that number is a quick way to find it, is to do a what's my IP from the browser. In this case, that won't work for me because my PC uses a different internet connection than my phone system is using. So I know what this address is. We'll wait and enter it later. On the flip side, if anything is local, so all of your phones that are connected to your local area network, all of your local networks that you're going to talk to go here. And you list them all right here. So then the system knows if I'm going through my LAN port, I'm going to not change the address. It's going to reply to my local address. But if I'm talking outside of the network and I'm going out to the external part of my world, then I'm going to tell it reply to this address. So it knows how to talk to the different devices that it connects to with the correct address. If you don't put anything in here and tell it to use address and SDP, then the phone system talks to the SIP provider and tells it its local address. And then the SIP provider tries to respond to that local address and it can never make it back. So the calls won't establish, or they might establish, but you won't have any audio because it's not telling it the correct place to go back to. So this is an important setting. IAX settings, these are used if you're using an IAX trunk rather than a SIP trunk. I won't go through these, but the same type of stuff applies. All the settings are in there for it to modify that type of trunk. RTP settings. RTP is a fancy way of saying audio packets. So if you're sending information across the internet, your RTP is your audio streams. So the range start and end is 10,000 to 20,000. This can be whittled down. It can be 10,000 to 10,500. You need one of these ports open for every direction of audio. So one call uses 2 ports, one for inbound audio, one for outbound audio. I usually leave it default, and I just let it be. If I'm having trouble with people trying to hack in or things like that, I might whittle it down, or if I need the ports for something else, I'll whittle it down. But this is where you would change that on the system. As long as it's set 10,000 to 20,000, the phone system will assume that you have all 10,000 of those ports available for it to use on the firewall. And that's a setting you'll do at another time. Music on hold. This is something that's new as well. These disable enable buttons. Before the previous firmware, you used to be able to delete all of these. Some people don't like the sound of these, like the Robot Diddy one sounds like a fast-paced video game. So you might want to turn that one off. And this is the new part about it. You can now disable these. If you want your own music on hold, you have to create a new music on hold class. And that'll allow you to flip between them right here. And the ones you create, you can delete. But the default ones can't be deleted. They can only be disabled. The voice prompts. This is where you create your recordings for your IVRs and things like that. For the most part, you don't mess with your language prompts unless you want to change the language on your system. Custom prompt is where you can record one or upload a custom prompt, and you can even download them all to save them all for later. If you're recording a new one, you give it a name, you give it a format, either way is fine, and you pick an extension, and it will call that phone and let you record whatever it is you want to record. The upload option is also there, so if you've already have custom-made recordings, you can upload them using that. Call failure tone setting. This is the generic settings that are in place for all of the different responses that the system would receive and what it would play based on the response. So you can change those to be other things. I think you can even create new ones if you really want. Jitter buffer. The jitter buffer is a tool used if you are having like crackly sound, things like that, lag in your sound. So like you start talking but it comes out choppy. A jitter buffer puts a little timer in place. It says, I want you to hold the information for like 100 extra milliseconds. Now this is milliseconds. This is a tiny amount of time, and you as a person probably wouldn't even notice it. But it lets it collect the information before it passes the audio streams onto you so that you don't get any choppiness. Usually you don't need to use this. Occasionally it is needed, and so it's in place here as the jitter buffer if you need it. Interface settings. This is your analog line settings. So if you are using analog lines, this is where you adjust the settings for that. When you put in FXO lines, that's the outside lines from your provider, you need to plug them in and do this detection here. This detects the power levels of those lines and lets them fill in automatically. Otherwise, you come in here and you can set the settings manually to what you believe they need to be or what the provider tells you they need to be. But if you hit detect, it'll figure it out for you and set those settings. And if you're having analog line troubles, this is one of the first things you should do, an ACIM detection. Recording storage. So you can add, like I said before, SD cards and USB drives to hold your recordings. The hard drive should be an NTFS. That's the recommended file system for these recordings. And if you have enable auto change enabled, then if you pop out the SD card, it'll record on the local storage. You pop the SD card back in, it's going to start recording on the SD card again. So it allows it to flip back and forth as you have devices available. NAS, this is a new thing that they've recently added, and it allows you to use, I believe, a network drive to save your recordings. And that's all I'll dive into with that one. I'll let you guys work on that one later. The next section, system settings. These are used very little. Once you set them up, they're pretty much set. You don't have to mess with them anymore. The HTTP server, that is if you have a certificate and want that warning to go away, you can do that kind of stuff in here. Network settings, this is where you set your static address. If you want the different modes that your system can be in, if you want to use it as a router, you would set it to route mode. If you want to use both LAN and WAN ports, or sometimes they're called LAN 1, LAN 2, you set it to dual and it'll let you use both ports. I most often use switch. Plug it into my local area network and let my router route everything from there. If you use it as a router, it has static routes and port forwardings and all the other settings you can use. But like I said, for the most part, I just use it as a switch because I don't want my phone system to have to handle routing all of the internet traffic as well as trying to mitigate the phone call traffic as well, because the phone call traffic is so much more important to me than my network traffic. Being able to access the internet and whatnot. I want the phones to always, always, always work. OpenVPN is a feature that allows a phone to VPN in directly to the phone system and act as if it were locally there. So you don't have to have a VPN router or VPN server or anything like that. You could open VPN from the phone straight to the phone system, something like that. I've read a lot about it. I haven't actually set one up on OpenVPN. I use VPN a lot, but I haven't tried the new OpenVPN settings on the system. DDNS, dynamic DNS. So the system can mess with that external host setting in PBX-SIPNet using dynamic DNS built right into the system, so you can actively alter that address that it's sending to using these settings. If you don't activate it here, you can put the dynamic DNS address of your system right into that PBX-SIPNet setting, and that'll work as well. Security settings. This is an important one, especially if you're using SIP trunks. If you're using SIP trunks, I always, always, always recommend turning fail to ban on. Unless you have your SIP trunks so isolated on the firewall that only signals from the SIP provider can get through. Even then, I'd probably enable fail to ban just to keep sure that nothing was getting through that shouldn't be getting through. SSH access is on here as well. If you want to enable SSH, you have to turn it on. LDAP, so you can create a phone book that can be shared by all of your phones, and that is the LDAP server and LDAP phone book. So you can create any kinds of phone books that you want with any numbers that you want and push those to the phones via LDAP server. By default, all of the extensions are included in the base phone book. So all of those will show up no matter what. It's the extra numbers that you have to create phone books for. Time settings. This is actually got a few things that you need, especially if you're going to use time-based routing. The automatic date and time is turned on, and so it'll just grab whatever it's supposed to. But if it's not grabbing the right thing, you can set the time zone here. If you need to, you can manually set the date and time. You can tell it that the phone system will be the NTP server for the phones, meaning the time server. So all the phones will grab its time from here. If you don't check this, all of the phones will grab their time from the DHCP server. Office time. Once you program in office time, you pick your days, Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 is your office time, something like that. 17, say 16:59. So if that's your office time and I save it, then when I use the inbound route, when I make my inbound route, it'll ask me, what do I want to do during office time? Or what do I want to do outside of office time? This is what it's going to reference. Whatever you have in here for office time is what it will use. The holiday is the same thing. Whatever I type in for holidays, so I can say on a holiday, go to this different route. We'll use Christmas, December 25th. And these are not in order Sunday to Saturday. They are in order by number, so the order in which they are here has no relevance on the day of the week. December 25th is my holiday for Christmas, so then when my inbound route says during holidays go this other route, it'll reference this holiday, and on that day every year it's going to route it differently. And so we will show you how to do that in the inbound and outbound or inbound routes later on. Email settings. This is important as well. By default, the system can act as an email server, but it will often get flagged as spam. So if you leave these settings like this, they may or may not work. I recommend flipping it to client and getting a Gmail address or any kind of email address that you want. The server for it, for example, Gmail is smtp.gmail.com:465. You need that port number in there because there's no other place to put it. And that will send to that server on that port. Username and password. And you can use a POP server if you want. I recommend the SMTP server. These two settings down here can be whatever you want. We'll say voicemail. And it will be voicemail@mydomain.com. And that is what they will appear to come from. But whatever the username and password up here is set to is where the email will actually come from. Once you get all these settings in, you save it, apply it, and do a test. The test lets you type in an email address and send a test email to it to see if these settings are working. If they are, you can flip here to the email send log and see what happens. You're looking for a 250 code where it says sent successfully. If you get any other code, you troubleshoot from there. Maintenance. User management. This is where you create new users. I've said previously, if you want access to upgrade, backup, and the system cleaner, you must be logged in as the admin. You can only have one admin, and he has super administrator privileges. No other user has it. Do not lose the password for admin. If you lose the password for admin and do not have your email settings set up, you have no way to reset that password. And you will need to factory reset and start building from scratch. Not fun. So always make sure you hang on to this admin password, never lose it, and always make sure your email settings are working so you can reset the password should you need to. If you do that, everything else is usually pretty straightforward. You can use backups and restores. If you want another user, the best you can do is an administrator, not a super administrator. You can create other permission levels with other rights. So if I want to give somebody access to just the conference rooms, I can make a conference user and give them only access to that. And you can create all that kind of stuff in this section. So admin, don't lose it. Change information, this is where you change your password and the email, the reset email for that password. So if your email settings are working, whatever email address you put in here is what will be sent to for resetting the password. Operation log shows us everything that's happened. I messed with time settings, I deleted a time condition, I applied changes. It tells me everything that I've done on this system, what IP address of the computer that did it, what user was logged in at the time. It tells me everything. And this can't be changed or altered, but they can be deleted. There we go. The last thing that happened was the admin deleted the operation log. Syslog is used for troubleshooting. System events, I always come in here and I go to the alert event list. I highlight everything and turn all those alerts on. Now I don't turn on all the emails, and I don't turn on the HTTP notification unless you really want it. So by turning all of these on, whenever I do any of these actions, log in, log out, it will log it in this alert log. If they're not in the event list, it will not show up here. So if I log out and I type in the wrong password, I go, oh darn it, wrong password. And I type in the right password. And I go back down here to those system events, it will log that information. I didn't apply my changes. There's your lesson on applying changes. If you don't apply your changes, what you just changed will not save. Wrong password, right password. you can see user login failed from that address. Tried to log in as admin, and this one succeeded. So it really logs all that. So if somebody's trying to hack into your system and you have these alerts on, then you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see the IP address that it came from and who's messing with you. Upgrading, this is where you upgrade the software on your system. If you're going to upgrade the software, do a backup first. This is where you do a backup. You can create a scheduled backup that happens on a time frame. To do that, you have to enable it and set your conditions. You can use a TFTP server, or you can use the SD card. Whatever you want to use, but use something. Create regular backups. It's important. System cleanup allows you to clean up recording files and voice logs and operation logs and all that kind of stuff automatically if you want to. If you have a ton of storage, it's not a big deal. If you don't, use the cleaner. The cleaner is the one that lets you clean stuff out. And you can choose to just use USB cleaner and SD card cleaners. So this is helpful if you have limited space. If you don't have limited space, it's not a big deal. Troubleshooting. This is where you do a packet capture. So if you're having trouble and you need somebody like me to help you troubleshoot, you come here to your Ethernet capture, make sure it's on the LAN port, because that's where your calls are flowing through. You hit start, and as soon as the stop light comes up, you make your call. You do your test, it fails, you hang it all up, you hit stop, and then you download. And this is the file that you send me. And I can look at that file and see what's happening. Grandstream can look at that file as well. So this is a quick, easy way to get a failed call information to the people that can help you troubleshoot it. Network troubleshooting. Signal troubleshooting, just like network troubleshooting, except for analog lines. Service check. So sometimes your system might not be detecting, how do you say that? If your system isn't responding to the SIP packets correctly, this is like a check. Check cycle is every 60 seconds. If it fails 3 times in a row, it restarts the SIP service. So it lets you restart that SIP service without having to reboot your phone system. So if you're noticing that your SIP options aren't responding correctly, often you turn on this service and it will start checking itself every now and again. One side note is if you turn this service on, make sure you whitelist your own IP address, your 127.0.0.1, yourself, so to speak, in your security settings. Make sure you whitelist yourself, otherwise you can potentially ban yourself. It's kind of funny. All right. CDR, call detail records. This is where your calls sit. This is where you get to see what calls have been made, that sort of thing. CDR is the first tab. Every call that gets made gets listed here. Since we haven't created any, there's nothing to look at. But it'll tell you where the call came from, where it went to, what trunk it used, what time it started, what the actual call time is versus talk time. So if you had 10 seconds of ringing versus, so like if they had a 30-second call with 10 seconds of ringing, you'd have a call time of 40 seconds but a talk time of 30 seconds. And then at the end here, you even have all your recording files if you're recording those calls. Statistics I haven't looked at too much, but it tells you in a graph format your inbound calls, outbound calls, all that kind of stuff, so you can see how many calls you're making, who's making them. Yeah, the statistics, you get the idea. Even though you can grab your recording files here with each log, if you want to see them all at once, you can come here and there can be sorted by date, time, caller, callee, size, and you can download them from here. API configuration. So if you're going to use something that might integrate with a phone system, like a property management system, this is part of that API configuration. The value-added features are the extras. This is the stuff that doesn't really have a home in any of those other sections, but has value to us. They're usually unique settings. Most people don't use many of them, but we're going to go through it. Zero config is the one that you would use most commonly. Zero config is the provisioning system so that you can immediately set up an extension without having to log into the phone itself. So the IP address of the phone would show up here. You'd be able to hit edit and assign the extension and just tell it to push it to that phone. All of the other stuff here, the global policy, global templates, model update, and the settings itself, all of those allow you to manipulate what settings you want to change on all the phones. And there's lots of ways to do it. I'm not going to go through it right now, but this is essentially the provisioning system built in to Grandstream. AMI. I honestly don't know what that one stands for yet. CTI server, CRM. This is a contact management program that might integrate. Sugar, CMM, vTiger, these are Salesforce, Zoho. These are all the pre-configured ones that you can do. PMS, that's Property Management System. Wake up service, so it's think of it like an alarm. This is what a hotel might use to wake up their customers sitting in the room that want to be woken up in the morning by the phone call. So that's the wake up service. Fax sending, you can send faxes right from the system. You just type in the number and attach your file and then hit send, and it'll show you down here what it's trying to do. You have to have all your routes and stuff in place, and it should tell you if it sent it or failed. But this is just for fax sending. Every individual user interface has this as well. So you don't have to give them admin access to send a fax. They can log into their personal user if they want to. The announcement center, you can create announcements like our building is on fire, please vacate the premises. And you can send that to a group of phones that's predetermined, and you can create key codes to do that. So you might type *21 for the 21 announcement, and then *21 555, where 555 is the group that you're sending to. And you can quickly dial it into your phone, hit dial, and it will automatically send that message out to all of the phones to let everybody know what's going on. So emergency announcements can be done this way, stuff like that. WebRTC is a whole nother thing. I'm not even going to try to explain it, but it is starting to be built into the backbone of phone services and web interfaces and good stuff. So that is the overview of the entire system, what it can do, what each section is used for, and that wraps it up. We will go through how to program everything in the next section.